Okay, let's pick up where we left off. We were in the thick of McTaggart's argument against the reality of time. So, in sum, his overall argument was that time essentially involves the A series. Remember, the A series is that a given event starts out as being future, and then at some point it becomes present, and then it recedes into the past. This involves three characteristics of events, and also, I guess, of times. Being future, being present, and being past, or futurity, presentness, and pastness. According to McTaggart, it's of the very essence of time to involve these three characteristics, but unfortunately for time, he argues, the A series involves a contradiction. So the contradiction is supposed to be that no event or time can have all three of these characteristics because each one of them is incompatible with the other two. So being present is incompatible with being past or future, and being future is incompatible with being present and past, and being past is incompatible with being future or present. Right? So there's an inconsistency among the three A characteristics. So we went through what McTaggart's reasoning was for each of these two major premises. All right, so for the first premise, the time essentially involves an A series. He argues that there can't be there can be no time unless there's change. There can be no change unless there's an A series. Therefore, time entails or requires an A series. And then that the A series involves a contradiction. McTaggart's argument is that the A characteristics, as I've already suggested, are mutually incompatible, but every event in an A series must have all three of these characteristics. Must go from being future to being present to being past. So any A series involves a contradiction. Historically, there have been two major answers to this kind of argument. Eternalism and presentism. So these are the two. Major defenses of the reality of time against this anti-realist argument. According to the eternalist, all temporal truths are timelessly or eternally true. So there's no temporal passage. The eternalist has basically a static view of the basic nature of time. So they would understand time wholly in terms of the B series and would say that the A series is unreal or can be reduced to some kind of psychological phenomenon. But it's not really in the world. Either it's totally eliminable or it can be reduced to some psychological or mental characteristics or relations. So reality in itself, the actual physical reality of time, doesn't involve anything like presentness and pastness and futurity. There's just events that are related to one another in terms of earlier than, later than, and simultaneous with, which are the B relations. Okay, so they can deny the premise that time essentially involves an A series in the main argument, and they reject the premise as well, and supporting that argument of McTaggart's that there can be no change without the A series. They deny that. They say you can have change because change is just having things having a property at one time and then not having it at a subsequent time. And we don't need presentness or pastness or futurity to understand that. All we need is just that there's a series of times related to one another in terms of earlier than and later than and so forth, and simultaneous with. A thing has a property at one moment, doesn't have it at a subsequent moment, it's changed. We don't need the A and B series for that. I guess the A and B series come in when you talk about, the A series comes in when you talk about substantial change, that is coming into being and passing away, but not qualitative change. So it seems like on the eternalist view, a thing doesn't really come into being or pass away in the way that we ordinarily think. So if you believe in an eternalist four-dimensional space-time continuum, it's going to always be true that you exist at some point in there. And if we don't in the continuum, and the fact that you die at some point, okay, so should we really be in mourning because you're still in existence? I mean, if there's no distinction between present, past, and future to be drawn, then everything is just all there in the space-time continuum. No part of it is privileged over any other part. It eternally exists. I guess we can say that you have certain properties at some times in the continuum and not at other times. But it doesn't seem like we can say that you cease to exist, since you will exist, so to speak. You would exist at some points in the continuum. And that'll always be true. All right, so that's the eternalist response to the argument. So they can defend the reality of time by jettisoning the A series altogether. The presentist takes a different tack against the argument. Presentists say that events and objects only exist in the present, and likewise for times. So only the present moment exists together with what exists in the present moment. They believe that the only things that truly exist in the present or now. Of course, it's still true. They argue, though, that it's true that it's now true that there once were things that don't exist now. Okay, but the only things that exist are the things that exist in the present. So, on their view, dinosaurs don't exist. Okay, they did exist, but they don't exist, since they don't exist in the present. So what this means is, first of all, the A properties literally won't be had successively by events or times, let alone all at once. So clearly it won't be true. Clearly the premise, McTaggart's contradiction that a single time or event has these incompatible properties of being past, present, and future won't be true on the assumption that only the present exists and things in the present. Other times won't exist in the present, and the present doesn't have the properties of being past or future, obviously. It's just present. So the present won't, the present time or events occurring at the present time won't have these other properties, so there'll be no contradiction. These other properties, by these other properties I mean being past and future. They won't have these properties. So the presentist would then reject the argument that the A series lands us in a contradiction. We can avoid any contradiction if we only if we affirm only the existence of things in the present. There'd be no way to get to the conclusion that these things in the present are also past and future, since the past and future have no, right? So clearly we get out of it on that interpretation. St. Augustine was an early defender of presentism. So he mourned the fact that when he was an old man, he mourned the fact that his younger days were no longer in existence. Whereas some eternalists wouldn't mourn the death of somebody because for them that person is still in existence, just at a point in the continuum that they can't get to. Right? But they're still existing. There's no flow of time. Any questions about these two proposed views?
Someone who holds to presentism, how would they describe things like the past and the future?
Yeah.
It seems like they don't have any terminology that would accurately state, because you can't say, oh, well, that happened a while ago, because it just doesn't exist.
Right, so the question is, how would the presentist, since he only believes in the existence and reality of things in the present, describe things in the future or the past? Well, the answer is that although they only accept the reality of things that are in the present, they believe, unlike the eternalists, generally speaking, they believe that we can meaningfully use tenses, and that in fact tenses, like the past tense, the future tense, and the present tense, that they believe that these tenses are irreducible. That is, that we can't reduce them to either, well, we certainly can't reduce them, according to the presentist, to non-tensed discourse. Remember, McTaggart had argued that we could reduce tense discourse to tenseless discourse plus talk about A characteristics. So we could say something was the case if it obtained at a time, right, such that it obtained it at a time such that that time had the property of being passed. Right, so that was his argument. That's what generated this alleged infinite regress for the presentist. I mean, for the believer in the reality of time. Excuse me. The argument was if you believe in the reality of time, you believe in the A series, and then you've got to say that a given event has all three of the A characteristics, but they're incompatible. And if you try to say, well, there's no inconsistency because the A characteristics are had successively, not at the same time, then we get this infinite regress of times, of temporal systems. It doesn't seem like we're able to capture the idea of the flow of time on that view. Because I mean, if you have a temporal line and you suppose that, well, there's an event E1 and a later event, imagine it's going in this direction here. Right, from past to future. The idea is at some point, there's going to be, it's first going to be the case that E1 has the property of being present, and then it's going to be the case that E2 has the property of being present at this later time. But from the perspective of the B series, which is also entailed by time, clearly you have to have a B series if you have time as well. Things have to be earlier and later and simultaneous with one another. From the perspective of the B series, E is eternally earlier than, E1's eternally earlier than E2, and E2 is eternally later than E1. And furthermore, it's eternally the case that E1 was present, right? And E2 was present, right, at a different time and so forth. That's all the case. So what is really the presentness of these events consistent? It doesn't seem to consist in the fact that E1's at T1 and E2's at T2, because that's always the case, right? So what is it? Well, presentness is this sort of, Van Cleve says, well, it's sort of like a spotlight that shines down and illuminates different parts of the line. So it shines down on this one, and then after that's, right, so there's a succession. The spotlight sweeps along the timeline, illuminating first E1 and then E2. And that's the idea. But isn't it also true that the spotlight illuminates E1 at T1, illuminates E2 at T2, and those are eternal truths as well. So it's hard to see how you really how you avoid the regress, because then we can say, well, we need another spotlight shining on that spotlight, and so on and so on and so on, right? So that's McTaggart's argument that we get this bizarre infinite regression of times or of timelines. We have the first timeline and the timeline of the presentness of the events on the first timeline, and then the timeline of the presentness of that presentness, and the timeline of the presentness of the presentness of the presentness, right? On and on and on. So the advocate of presentism, though, takes a different tack. Right? They deny that there really are any events that stand in the B relations. right? Because for the things that actually stand in the be relations, both things that stand in a relation must exist, right? And of course, that's what the eternalist says, right? They all do exist. The eternalist gets rid of the A series, right? He just has the B series. And the things in the B series always exist and always stand in these static or fixed B relations. And we talked about some examples of that last time, right? Whatever, World War II is always later than the Battle of Hastings. I think I used a different example.
Like Columbus Day.
Yeah, Columbus discovering America. Some later signing of the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, so we have these static, fixed events that always exist in the places where they occur in the space-time continuum. So eternalism is often associated actually with, though it doesn't have to be, but it's usually associated in contemporary philosophy or metaphysics with the doctrine that the physical universe consists of a four-dimensional space-time continuum, whereas presentists often reject that view. It seems like they have to reject it, if they're strict presentists anyway, because for them the only thing that exists is in that present moment. So there can't be a space-time continuum involving things in the past and things in the future and so on. That view goes with the B theory, that all things that exist at any time have an equal degree of reality, whereas the presentist holds that the things in the present have a privileged degree of reality. In fact, they're the only things that have any reality at all. So how do we talk about things in the past then? Well, according to the presentist, talk about tense discourse, like E1 will occur, E1 did occur, E1 is occurring in the sense of presently, as opposed to a untense, timeless is, such as we use in 2 and 2 is 4 talk. According to the presentist, this kind of tense discourse is irreducible, whereas the eternalist typically holds that tense discourse is reducible to generally for eternalists, tense discourse is going to be reducible to B discourse. So I'll give you some examples of how that goes. One four-dimensionalist who's an eternalist is J.C.C. Smart. He was also a materialist who defended the mind-brain identity theory. But anyway, he says, for example, that it will rain, which is a tense statement, can be reduced to rain occurs later than this utterance. So when you say it will rain, you're saying rain will occur later than this utterance that I'm now making. It did rain would then be, how would we translate that? That's a past tense, right? So that would be what? Rain occurs earlier than, earlier than this utterance. So he's reducing tenses to B relations, whereas the presentist actually thinks that tenses express, tenses are primitive, irreducible expressions. So they describe what was real, or what will be real, as opposed to what is real. And they would say the only things that exist are the things that are presently real. And things that were real are no longer real, and the things that will be real are not yet real. And the things that are presently are the real things. Does that?
Yeah.
So I think that works, as far as it goes. Rain occurs earlier than this utterance. And it is raining, right? That's the present tense. That'll be reducible to rain occurs, what? Simultaneously with this utterance. Well, you might just be thinking that it will rain, or did rain, or is raining, without uttering anything. So we might be advisable to modify this. Yeah, good. So we could say instead, rain occurs later than this thought. That might be seems to be an improvement. This seems a little too linguistic, right? And clearly, you don't have to be saying it for. So that would help. I mean, if you make the utterance, though, right, there would be the thought. But if you have the thought, there needn't be the utterance. So it seems like the thought would be the more basic. Not a big change, but it's not trivial. You know. Clearly in the same spirit as. Yeah. So. So the presentist would reject these reductions. Various arguments they can try to use to dispute the equivalence. One argument might be cognitive, that a person could affirm that it did rain without ever thinking that rain occurs earlier than this thought. So they can't be synonymous. It did rain can't be synonymous with rain occurs earlier than this thought. It's not clear that that's enough to refute the proposed reduction, though, because things that are non-synonymous can still be equivalent, and I think a reduction doesn't require that every aspect of the meaning of something be preserved. So one might be able to analyze the concept of a square, say, as a closed equilateral, a closed quadrilateral that's equilateral and equiangular. And you might argue that's what a square really is, that unpacks what a square is. It doesn't mean, though, that a person who employs the word square competently would know all that. It might be a process of learning to, say, make explicit all of the necessary and sufficient conditions for being square. So it's not clear that a failure of cognitive equivalence between it did rain and the proposed reduction would be enough to prove that the reduction fails. That seems implausible. Another argument against the reduction, though, could be that it could be true that, say, it did rain, right? Even if nobody was thinking that it did rain. That would dispute the equivalence between the two. Basically saying that the tense statement that it did rain does not entail the existence of any particular thoughts. So it basically comes down to whether you buy into the subjectivity or psychologically laden nature of tense statements, or not. Whether you think a reality in itself involves things being earlier or later, as expressed through tense. And that's fundamentally the issue. So, anyway, so it seems clear then that the eternalists and presentists are at loggerheads here, right? About this. So, presentists reject the reductions, but then use tense in order to describe the world at earlier or later times. So they clearly reject the B series, since no things ever stand in the relations that the eternalist says they do in terms of the B series, because there's nothing for a present event to be later than or earlier than. Doesn't exist. It did exist, but that's what you can say. Right? It did or will. Right? You can say that. That's not enough to say that it does exist, and therefore not enough to have a relation that holds between the two things, the thing in the present and the thing in the past or the future, whichever you're talking about. In a sense, the presentist also rejects aspects of the A series picture as well. The presentist denies that there are any events or times that successively have the properties of futurity, presentness, and pastness, because there's no temporal timeline in existence, right? Because they don't believe that exists. There are just these present moments, right? And the only one that exists is the present one. The other ones did exist. So it's never going to be the case that a given time has the property of being future, present, and then past. Because right after it doesn't exist anymore. So it won't have the property of, it won't become past or present. It won't become past or present. It won't lose the property of being future because it didn't exist. It doesn't exist in the past. So there's no way for a single time to have all three of these properties. So in a way, the presentist doesn't accept the picture that the A-theorist puts forward. The A-theorist just accepts one of the three properties, presentness, as a property of times and events. Times and events never have either of the other two alleged A properties. Right? They just have the property of being present. They did have the property of being present, and they will have other events will have the property of being present. Right? No single event can have all three because they never have two of them. Events only have the property being present. Times only have the property of being present. And that's true at any time, including times that did exist and will exist. They'll exist just when they're present. Right? So this idea that the A theorist originally puts forward gets rejected as well, that we have this spotlight that flows along. Because the A theorist doesn't have this, doesn't have the timeline anymore. He's just got the present. So in that way, we're getting rid of this picture that the present is sort of like a spotlight that moves along the temporal timeline. And we saw that that seems to lead to problems when you have that picture. So best way to escape is to reject that picture. Okay, so we have these two basic perspectives. Time as a dynamic thing, which goes with presentism and those who believe in the A series. And then the static view of time, the B theory view of time, which goes with the idea of a four-dimensional space-time continuum. So you have a cluster of views which are laid out on page 79 of Van Cleve's article in Space and Time. So I just wanted to go through those pairs of views. So these represent controversies in the philosophy of time between those who believe in dynamic time and those who believe in static time. The basic idea is that those who believe in dynamic time tend to accept the A theses or propositions, though they don't have to accept all of them, but they tend to accept a significant subset of these A propositions. And those who believe in static time, as opposed to dynamic time, affirm or tend to affirm a significant subset of these B theses. So these all mark out disputes. So the first is that we've touched on already, is the claim of the dynamic view of time, that tense is irreducible. It's irreducible and indispensable feature of our discourse. And it reflects a genuine feature of reality. It's not a purely psychological or conventional aspect of our discourse. It actually reflects a genuine feature of reality. And you can see how the presentist would hold that, right? But it actually reflects what that aspect of reality which we refer to as existence itself. So on this view, you're going to have to say that there are some propositions that literally change their truth value with the passage of time. So the proposition, it is raining, will be say true when you're outside with an umbrella and there's rain pouring down on you. And then at some other time it'll be false, right? Because you'll be in a desert and it's not raining. Right? So at different times then a single proposition can have different truth values. Notice that proposition has no date in it. If you were to date the proposition and say it is raining on a particular time, on July 1st, 2016 at 7 p.m., then that proposition would either be always true or always false. But if there is no data in the proposition, it seems like on this view that tense is irreducible, if you say it is raining, using the present tense, of course, has to be a present tense proposition, then it'll change its truth value, because presently it'll be raining, it'll be true, and then presently it is raining, right? At some other time will be false, using is as a present tense verb. Okay, on the other hand, the static theory of time holds that, as we've seen, tense is reducible or eliminable in favor of, for example, B relations. Reality can be described correctly and adequately without ever using any tenses, just by saying that certain propositions are true at particular times, and then they're eternally always true. Like it is raining at a certain particular date. So all true propositions are timelessly or eternally true because they're going to be dated and they can never change their truth value. If it's true that the chalk is falling at a certain particular time, like 11:15 today, then that's always true that the chalk fell down. And all truths will be expressed timelessly. Okay, so that's the first disagreement between the dynamic time cluster versus the static time cluster of views. There's a disagreement over the reducibility and status of tensed discourse. Right. The second disagreement has to do with whether the A characteristics of being future, present, and past are possessed successively or not, and whether they're reducible to B relations. So the dynamic theory sometimes holds that these A characteristics are possessed successively and that they're not reducible to B characteristics, whereas the static theory typically holds that the A characteristics are either illusory or can be reduced to B relations. So that's the contrast there. As we've seen, the presentists, though, might want to jettison this one, right? And it seems like the best view for the static theory of time won't stick to A2, since A2 seems to land you in difficulties with McTaggart. It might be better to say that A characteristics are not successively possessed. That only being present is possessed. So one of the A characteristics is possessed by different propositions at different times. All right, the third has to do with the ontological status of the present. So the dynamic theory says that the present is ontologically privileged, that it has a special kind of reality. Things in the present have a special kind of reality, not possessed by things in the past or the future. This is a pretty intuitive view, right? I mean, most of us think this way. I mean, if we had a pet turtle that died when we were 3 years old, right, and then we have a new turtle pet, we think that the new turtle pet exists and that the old turtle pet has passed away and no longer exists, right? And that's how we think. So that's a very natural view, right? To think that way. It does make what exists very thin. Right? Because the present is just an instant. It has no duration, unless you believe in a granular theory of time. And even then, it doesn't have much of a duration, right? Its duration is an inconceivably tiny interval of time, according to physics. If there are minimal times, that are minimal extended intervals, or quanta of time, they're extremely short. So either what exists is extremely short, or it's just an instant. The static time advocate, though, says that there's no ontological difference at all between things at earlier present and later times. They're all on a par. So things that don't things that say don't exist now, but do exist in the future, like children that aren't around here now, but will be here in the future. According to the dynamic time theory, the ones in the future don't exist, and the ones that are around now do. Whereas for the B theory, they all exist in the very same way. They all have an equal reality, since there is no objective feature of reality represented by the claim that something's present. Talk about things being present is either false or comes down just to some psychological relation, like the thing is exists simultaneously. The thing is simultaneous with our utterances or thoughts, or whatever. But that's also true of the things in the future. They'll be simultaneous with the thoughts of the future that are there. So, for them, there's no ontological distinction between things existing at different times. The fourth disagreement has to do with the openness of the future. So the A theory, or dynamic theory of time, says that the future is indeterministic or open. It's not yet determined by things in the present. Some propositions about what will happen are neither true nor false presently. They're just indeterminate. They will be true or will be false, but right now they're indeterminate because the future doesn't exist. Only the present exists. Propositions about the future then can't be said to have a particular truth value at present. The static theory of time says the future is just as set as the past. We may not know it, and maybe for that reason it may appear to be open, but in fact, propositions about the future already have whatever truth value they're going to have, whether it's true or false. So propositions are all dated, implicitly at least, and are either eternally true or eternally false, or timelessly true or timelessly false. The fifth disagreement has to do with the metaphysical nature of identity over time. And for the dynamic time theorists, this actually helps to soften the problem I mentioned earlier about the present being really short is the A theorist holds that things endure through time. That is, the very same thing can exist in the past, present, and future, literally. So the B theorist, or static theorist, says that things perdure through time rather than endure, which means that they're made up of temporal parts. To say that something endures is to say that it exists at different times, or it presently exists and did exist at different times, but has no temporal parts whatsoever. Whereas for the B theorist, to say that a thing exists through time is to say that it has a series of different parts that make it up, each of which exists at a different time. So the static time theorist, or B theorist, says that objects that exist through time are made up of temporal parts that exist at different times. The A theorist, or dynamic time theorist, says that an object wholly exists at every moment that it's real. It's not made up of stages or parts that exist at different times. So that means even though the present moment is very short or extensionless, objects still can endure through time. So that softens the blow that the present is really, really short. The present is the only thing that's real. Things in the present are the only things that are real, but the things that are real exist can be said to be real at many different presents, the very same thing, not just different parts of it. So for the B theorist, or a static time theorist, time is analogous to space. But for the dynamic time theorist, it's not. The analogy is that a thing that is extended through space has different spatial parts at every point of space at which it exists. So a table, which is extended through space, has a say right half over there and a left half over there, right? So it's extended through space only in virtue of having spatial parts that exist in different positions of space, like a right half over there and a left half over there, and so on. The static time theorist says that temporal extension of an object also involves having parts, in this case temporal parts that exist at different times. Okay, so you would have, say, a part which consists of your existence on Monday, and another part which maps onto your existence on Tuesday, and so on, and you're the sum of all these parts as a thing that perdures through time. For the dynamic time theorist, you can be said to endure through time. That is, you exist as a complete, entire entity whenever you exist. You're not made of these temporal parts. Any question about that? So they claim that temporal existence through time is disanalogous to existence through space, whereas the static time or space-time theorist argues for what might be said to be the space-time worm theory of persisting things. They say that a thing persists through space-time if and only if it's a kind of worm-like entity, right? that has stages at each point in the space-time continuum corresponding to the times at which it exists. So there's a space-time continuity relating to a continuous sequence of spatiotemporal parts existing at each moment that the thing can be said to exist. You're just the sum of your parts through space-time. Okay. All right, so I think that gives us a pretty good idea of the contrast between the two positions. So it seems like there are at least two ways to escape out of McTaggart's original argument that time is unreal, either through presentism, which says that only the present is real, so there's not going to be any kind of way that things are going to be present and past and future, but only the present has any reality. Or eternalism, which disavows the A series as anything having any metaphysical significance. At best, it has some kind of mind-dependent significance, but not any reality in the things themselves. All right, so I think these theories may. I want to turn to the question of time travel now, because that's an interesting question. The implications of different views about the nature of time for that. So a time traveler would be somebody who, say, is able to go from, in the most interesting case, from the present into the past. There doesn't seem to be any special problem about traveling from the present to the future in some sense. We all seem to do that. Right? But it doesn't seem possible to go the other way, right? It seems like it would be extremely difficult, and we know of no verifiable method for approaching that question. As a practical matter anyway, and perhaps theoretically it's impossible. I suppose one way it could happen is if the direction of time could change somehow. So we normally think of time as having a direction, as going from the present to the future, if you're a presentist, right? Well, presentists don't believe in the existence of a future or a past. So maybe on presentism it just follows that time travel is impossible, since there's no past or future to go to. If that's right, then the question of time travel would only arise on the B theory, right, on the static picture of time. Because then there's actually a destination, whether it's in the future or the past, that you'd be traveling to. And kind of the picture we have is you get into the time machine and like 2 or 3 minutes pass and you step out and you're 50 million years in the future or 10,000 years into the past or whatever, right? So I guess these questions could be related to the directionality of time and the speed at which time, the rate or speed at which time passes. So we'd be thinking that we travel to the future in the time machine if we were in it for, say, 1 minute by our clock, but when we stepped out, 10,000 years had passed and we were 10,000 years into the future. at the year 12,013, right? Or if we stepped in and found ourselves 10,000 years in the past, right? Approximately 8,000 BC or something like that, right? So is that kind of thing possible? Well, I say one way would be if the direction of time could be reversed, or if the rate at which time flows could be changed. So let's look first at the issues about the direction of time. There are different theories about the directionality of time and what that's grounded in. So one view is that you often see in literature on the direction of time is that the direction of time depends on what's known as entropy. Entropy is a measure of order or disorder. So the idea is that basically that the natural tendency of things in the universe is such that entropy overall is gradually increasing. What that means is that the universe is gradually becoming more and more disorderly, that things go from being orderly to disorderly. Entropy is said to increase in virtue of what's known as the second law of thermodynamics, which we can understand intuitively as having certain consequences, such as representative consequences, such as, say, things tend to wear out. So that's entropy catching up with you. So if you have, say, a television set, right, that works, eventually it's going to break. Same thing's true of a computer or a watch or whatever. Same seems to be true of living organisms. There's a tendency for them to burn out and die. And so on. So we're constantly fighting with entropy to try to keep our things going. It takes energy to do that. So locally we can produce highly orderly systems, but only because elsewhere entropy is increasing, like in the sun. And the sun will eventually burn out. So it's predicted that eventually the universe will totally collapse, that all the stars will burn out at some very far future date. This is known as the heat death of the universe, though it's not really very hot. It's just that energy is completely evenly distributed throughout the universe, so nothing can really happen except random motions. It's a very disorderly state. So all the order we see in the universe will eventually dissipate, and things will become randomized. So it's often claimed that the flow of time, the idea that time has a direction going into the future, is based on the second law of thermodynamics and the direction of entropic disintegration. So it's claimed that if you could reverse entropy, then time would move in the other direction. Instead of going into the future, it would go into the past. So if you imagine a world in which sort of everything is reversed, where people start out, say, as near death and then wind up as babies from things moving the other way. Entropy always decreasing, moving to a more and more orderly state. Then time would be moving backwards. So imagine like imagine taping the whole universe and then playing the tape backward. Then they would say, well, time would be going backwards. So what do you think? Is that plausible? Would time be going backwards? Or would things just be happening in the reverse order, but still it would be true that, it would just be true in that world that you're a baby after you're middle-aged or whatever.
Seems to go against like cause and effect because in some situations, like with the baby example, you start out in the bed, things typical that you go from death and you go like.
Well, you would if entropy were.
Yeah, yeah. It just seems like, well, what happens after a baby? Do you go back into the womb?
Yeah. Yeah, into the next generation.
Because then at that point, I guess, it just seems weird because at that point it doesn't seem like there's a causal principle to it. What causes you to keep going back? Is it just the energy?
Well, you're imagining that the laws of physics are,
Flip-flop?
yeah.
But instead it would be like more of like a effect cause? Rather than one cause?
No, it would just be that the causal relations are flipped. Yeah, because the laws are different. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really tests taxes our intuitions and beliefs and so on to think this kind of way. But these kinds of thoughts experiments are crucial in philosophy and metaphysics in particular, to push things to the limit. It's not clear to me why it wouldn't just be that that you'd be a baby later than or after you. I mean, it's not clear why that wouldn't be the case. So there's some reason to doubt that the direction of time depends on the second law of thermodynamics and the idea that entropy is increasing. An alternative theory, though, to pick up on your suggestion, is to understand the direction of time in terms of the direction of causation. And that seems to me to be the deeper analysis. In other words, to say that time passes or goes in the direction that it goes because causes are earlier than effects. Yeah. But if that were reversed, then time would go in the opposite direction. But it may be impossible to reverse that. Right? It may be a necessary truth, and we'll be discussing that in our next unit, which has to do with causation. It's been often held to be a necessary truth that causes precede their effects. So you could hold either that that's a necessary truth, so it's impossible for time to have the opposite direction than it has, if the direction of time is determined by the direction of causation, where causes are earlier than effects. Okay. Or, on the other hand, if you think that it is possible to have effects that are earlier than their causes, if you think that is possible, that's really hard to understand, right? Unless you have time travel, right? If that is possible, then it would be possible for time to have the opposite direction, to go from later to earlier. But then it would be the case that the later things are the causes of the earlier things. So I think that analysis of the direction of time is more plausible than the one in terms of entropy. So I'll just stand on that claim. But I think that may have been what you were getting at.
Yeah, I think that was. It just seems like it.
It sounded like it, because you were going from talk about entropy to talk about causes and effects.
Yeah. Seems at that point it's hard to. You can argue like about what caused it to go in that direction in a sense, because it seems like you're always dealing more with effects in a cause and effect universe, like you have one primary cause or something that keeps moving it along.
Yeah.
Like a domino effect. It's hard to take all the dominoes knocked down and to push them all back up into order or something. It just seems like it. And I guess it's just counterintuitive because that's not how we understand the universe.
Yeah, well, it's not. But it does seem possible to have a universe
Yeah,
where
everything's just.
things go in the opposite direction. Because the basic laws of energy are different. If we understand the directionality of time, though, in terms of the order of causes and effects, that causes precede their effects, then we can say that in a world in which you grow from adulthood to infancy, or whatever, right, that time still has the same direction.
Yeah.
Because what causes you to be an infant are your adult stages and so on, right? Yeah. But if you reverse the causal order, right, where effects produce the causes, you know, then it looks like it's at least arguably true that time would be going in the other direction. But I don't know that we can make any sense out of such a universe. So it's, I think, in any event, highly problematic that we can intelligibly conceive of time flowing in the opposite direction. Okay, so what about time travel then? Well, it seems that in view of the contemporary physics, Einstein's general theory of special and general theories of relativity, it's been argued that the general theory of relativity, at least, opens up the door to circular loops in time, and this was proven by Kurt Gödel, that there are distributions of matter and energy in the universe that it seems are logically consistent, which if they hold, Einstein's theories of general relativity would imply that a thing went from a later time to an earlier time. In terms of the special theory of relativity, you have the possible particle called a tachyon, which is allegedly would go from the future, move from the future into the past. These particles would always travel faster than light. So here's the thing. According to the special theory of relativity, the speed of light is the maximum speed that anything can go in the universe. Nothing can accelerate to a speed faster than that, because it would require an infinite amount of energy to accelerate it, even up to the speed of light. So you can't ever get to the speed. no particle can ever go from slower than the speed of light up to the speed of light, except for light. So the idea then is that it's consistent with the special theory of relativity. This is not to say that special theory of relativity implies that there are tachyons. It doesn't. But it's been shown that it's consistent with the special theory of relativity. I'm not talking about the general theory now, with the circular loops. I'm about the special theory of relativity. What's been said is that the theory rules out anything accelerating from less than the speed of light up to the speed of light. That's ruled out. Okay. But what is possible, or consistent with the theory, and therefore logically possible, even if not actually possible or physically or metaphysically possible, is a particle that always travels faster than the speed of light, so it doesn't need to be accelerated up to that speed. So these tachyons would be particles that are always going faster than light, and they would be streaming from later times to earlier times. Because according to Einstein's theory, time slows down as you get closer and closer to the speed of light. So if you get into a rocket ship, and this has been experimentally verified, that was traveling at a very high rate of speed, you would age much more slowly than people on Earth. So if you got in the rocket ship and traveled at 99% of the speed of light and traveled for 100 years and then returned, when you got back to Earth, like all your friends would be dead, and you would have only have aged, say, like 20 or 30 years. But if you can accelerate, if you could accelerate beyond the speed of light, which is impossible, physically impossible according to Einstein's theory, you would actually go into the past. But these tachyon particles are supposed to, allegedly, would always go faster than light, so they'd always be traveling from the future into the present, into the past. They'd be streaming all the way back. So that would be a kind of time travel. They're not the kind of time travel that human beings could engage in, since they're not tachyon. Okay, we'll have to stop now. We'll resume with this next time.